The text landed at 7:14 p.m. on a Chicago Monday, while my radiator knocked like a tired heart and the spaghetti water started to hiss. "We need space from you. Please don't reach out anymore at all." I read it twice, then a third time, as if the words might blink and turn into a joke. They didn't. They sat there lit blue, clean as a surgical cut, and suddenly the kitchen felt colder than the November wind clawing at my window. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. The pot boiled over, starchy water streaking down the burner. I turned the flame low and stared at the message until the steam fogged my glasses. I should have been angry or embarrassed or something with heat in it. Instead, I felt a quiet I'd only met once before, the night Lorraine died and the house decided to speak in creaks. I wiped my lenses with the edge of a dish towel and looked around my kitchen like it might offer a counter-argument. The dented kettle, the radio mumbling WGN highlights, the magnet shaped like the Sears Tower, pinning a receipt I'd forgotten, 2,100 to a florist on Grand Avenue. I paid that in April for their engagement party, because things were tight. This brick 2 flat on West Roscoe is what keeps me patched through winter. The garden unit rent, 1,150 on the first, covers heat, ComEd, and a little extra for Mia's presents. I built the equity with overtime shifts and cold sandwiches eaten under humming ballasts. Since Lorraine, the building has been my routine, my retirement plan, my last steady thing. I told myself the help I gave my son was just that, help. But there it was on the phone, a hard stop wrapped in politeness. "Don't reach out." I thought about the last 2 years of little bridges. $500 for daycare in February. Went $800 to tide them over in June. $3,700 for a dental surprise in October. $28,500, one Zelle memo at a time. Each transfer carried a promise like bubble wrap around it. "We'll square this up when we're stable." Stability never showed. Tonight they sent me distance instead. I walked to the kitchen hook, where I keep a spare key for the garden unit, a brass oval. That's been there since the Cubs won in 2016. My fingers found an outline of dust, like chalk around a body. The key was gone. I checked the junk drawer, the bowl by the door, the pocket of my windbreaker. Nothing. I sent a text. "Did you borrow the spare?" The typing dots bubbled and died. The read receipt stayed on. Something in me stiffened into a beam. I pulled my old black notebook from the bread box, the one Lorraine labeled, in her neat slanted hand, deeds and dues, and opened to a fresh page. I wrote the date, Nov 3, and 2 words, count everything. The pen scratched like a tiny saw. I took the florist receipt from under the magnet and slid it between the pages. I photographed my phone screen with the message open, then printed it with my clunky home printer that makes everything look like the 1990s. The spaghetti had gone past al dente into soft. I salted it anyway and ate standing up, the fork heavy, the sauce too bright. Across the room, the radiator kept tapping its slow Morse code. Not a threat, not a plea, just a rhythm you can live to if you decide you're going to live. I rinsed the plate, set it on the rack, and told the quiet the first rule I would keep: help is a bridge, not a leash. Tomorrow I would take my notebook to people who like paper more than promises. Tonight I would sleep beside a phone that had nothing left to say. The next morning the kitchen looked the same, but everything inside it felt rearranged. The mug I always reached for, Lorraine's old one with the faded Cubs logo, felt foreign in my hand. I poured coffee, sat at the table, and read the text again. "We need space from you. Please don't reach out anymore at all." You'd think grief and rage were opposites, but they share a hallway. I walked up and down it for 3 straight days. Nov 4, 5, 6. The calendar on the wall had little pencil notes. Mia's ballet, furnace inspection, property tax due. I couldn't erase them, so I just stared. Every word meant something that no longer included me. By the window, the radiator hissed, breathing like an old man who's had enough. I pulled the mortgage statement from the counter, $312,400 remaining. I folded it once, then again and again, until the numbers disappeared. What had I been to them? A safety net disguised as a father? A walking line of credit with a pulse. The house answered in creaks and pipes. The same sounds Lorraine once said made it alive. Now they just sounded tired. That evening, Nora called from her shift at Northwestern Memorial. I could hear heart monitors beeping faintly behind her. "Eat something with color," she said. "You sound gray." "I'm fine," I lied. Fine is what people say before they fall apart. After we hung up, I went digging through my old shoebox in the closet. Birthday cards, Father's Day cards, all from my son. On each one, my own handwriting kept a quiet record on the envelopes. $500, $2,200, $3,000. Little loans dressed up as love. It hit me that I'd been cataloging my generosity like a bookkeeper too afraid to close the ledger. I scrolled through the family group chat out of habit. There it was. A new photo of my son and his wife at a rooftop bar in the Gold Coast. Caption, "Year of growth." His smile looked wide enough to swallow regret whole. The post had 67 likes. Not one comment mentioned me. On Nov 6, I tried FaceTiming Mia. It rang until it gave up. I stared at the reflection of my own face on the black screen. I whispered, "Grandpa loves you," just in case she could somehow hear it through whatever wall her parents built. The oven timer blinked 00, refusing to be ignored. I didn't even remember setting it. That night, I bundled up and took the No. 77 Belmont bus just to move. The city glowed in streaks of sodium orange. I passed Addison and Kedzie, where brownstones rose like stitched-up ribs, and told myself not to cry in public. On the ride back, an older woman in a purple hat offered me a peppermint. I almost said no. Then I thought of Lorraine, who never turned down kindness, even when she couldn't return it. I took it, said thanks, and tasted the smallest kind of mercy. At home, I taped a new index card to the fridge. The Sharpie bled through the paper. Help is not ownership. Help is stewardship. I underlined it twice. The next morning, Novia 7, the fog had lifted just enough for purpose to sneak in. I shaved, ironed a shirt, and opened my deeds and dues notebook. Under count everything, I wrote mortgage balance, 312,400 zels, 28,500 rent income, 1,450 MO florist bill, 2,000 E. It looked clinical, like an autopsy of generosity, but it made me feel steadier. Numbers don't lie, even when people do. I made coffee again, strong enough to sting, and looked around the kitchen like a detective at a crime scene. Evidence everywhere, the missing key, the empty silence, the receipts. Lorraine's photo on the fridge watched me like she already knew where this was heading. That afternoon, I put on my coat and slipped the notebook into the inside pocket. The wind outside bit my face, sharp and clean. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I knew it would start with paper. By the time the sun went down, I had decided I wouldn't call, text, or plead. I'd answer their message the way they sent it, quietly, cleanly in writing. That's the thing about electricians. We don't yell when the power goes out. We find the wire, trace the short, and fix the circuit so it never burns us again. By Nov 8, the fog had settled into something useful. Focus. Chicago mornings have a way of stripping things to bone. The L rumbling, the cold air hitting your chest like a lesson. I buttoned my coat, slipped the deeds and dues notebook into my pocket, and took the bus downtown to the legal aid clinic on Ashland. The lobby smelled like coffee and Lysol, paper and purpose. A volunteer handed me a clipboard. The woman who called me back, Ms. Patel, had that calm voice lawyers use when they've already seen worse. I slid the phone across the desk, screen open to my son's text. Then the florist bill, the Zell list, and finally the photo of the missing key hook. She scanned everything, quiet for a long beat. "I'm sorry," she said. "That's a hard thing to read from family." "It's not the text," I said. "It's the pattern." Ms. Patel leaned forward, steepling her fingers. "We don't do revenge here, Mr. Turner. We do boundaries. But sometimes they look similar on paper." I almost smiled. "Paper's good. I trust paper." "Then you're halfway there," she said, pulling out a yellow legal pad. She drew boxes and labeled them title, trust, notices, proof. "You own the two flat outright?" "Almost. Still owe about 312 on the mortgage. Plenty of equity, she said. That means control. You don't need permission to protect what's yours. You just need documentation. She slid me a business card and a list of steps. Get your ownership printouts from the Cook County recorder. Review your accounts, close anything joint. Write down every dollar you've loaned them. Not for court yet, but for clarity. Boundaries need math. When I left the clinic, the sun had broken through the grey. The wind off the river cut my cheeks, but it felt cleaner than the air I'd been breathing for weeks. Nove 10, 2 p.m. I walked into Hawthorne and Belmont Bank, Eleanor's branch. She's been my teller for years. Sharp eyes, perfect bun, a memory for faces and ledgers. "Elena," I said, setting down my ID. "Need to close the joint emergency card I opened for my son a while back." She raised an eyebrow. "Trouble?" "Boundary work," her lips twitched. "That's my favorite kind." She printed out the closure form, watched me sign it, then highlighted the account history. "Looks like recent charges at Home Depot, Uber, some daycare payments. Nothing criminal but sloppy." "I just want clean lines," I said. "Paper is your friend," she reminded me, clicking her pen. "I'll issue a closure letter dated Nov 18. Keep it with your records." She also showed me how to set text alerts for any account access. "I like alerts," I said. "They don't lie." Before I left, she handed me a stapled statement showing my rent deposits, $150 every first of the month, steady as a heartbeat. Proof that my bricks still worked harder than my son did. 2 days later, on Nov the 12th, I took the blue line down to the Cook County recorder's office. The place smelled like old toner and disappointment. I filled out a form and waited under humming fluorescent lights. When my number flashed, the clerk, thin glasses, kind eyes, printed my property records. Title, mine. Deed, mine. And right there, stamped in black, transfer on death instrument filed in 2019, naming one beneficiary, Mia Turner, minor, held in trust until 25. I asked for 2 certified copies. He stamped them Nov 15-2025. The sound echoed like a gavel. When I got home, I laid everything out on the dining table, the text printed, the florist bill, folded, the Zell history, the closure form, the property record with that clean seal. It looked like a small museum of my patience. I took a photo of the empty key hook again. The dust had darkened slightly. Proof of absence. I taped it next to the first photo inside my notebook. Underneath I wrote, "Keys and locks tell the truth first. Nov 16, 7:40 p.m. Nora called. Christmas Eve dinner's on. Bring pie? Bring a notary too?" She laughed, thinking I was joking. "Why? Paperwork's always better with witnesses." There was a pause, then her tone shifted, serious but proud. "You're finally fighting back, huh?" "Not fighting," I said, "just adjusting voltage." That night, I drafted a note in my notebook, DEC 24, 5:30 p.m. Dinner per notary. Before bed, I flipped through Lorraine's old address book. Her handwriting looked like calm itself. Next to Mr. Dorsey, Union 456, she'd written trustworthy. He'd notarized our mortgage papers once. I'd ask him again, this time for something cleaner. When I closed the book, the radiator hissed once like approval. The house felt warmer, not from heat, but from order returning. People think revenge is heat. It's not. It's paperwork done in silence. It's watching the ink dry while the noise outside never knows you're planning. By Nova 17, the snow threatened to fall. I brewed another cup of coffee and looked at the index card on the fridge. Help is not ownership. Help is stewardship. I underlined it once more just to be sure it stayed true. Then I wrote under it, "Next step. Write the notice." The page smelled faintly of ink and resolve. Boundaries, I've learned, don't arrive in arguments. They arrive in envelopes. By Nov 18, Elena's closure letter from the bank came in the mail. Official letterhead, neat signature, date stamped just as promised. I slid it into a blue folder and labeled the tab, "Joint card." Closed. That was my first wall. Clean, quiet, indisputable. The following morning I called Ms. Patel. "I'm ready to write the notice," I told her. She replied, "Then we'll do it right." No emotion. Just documentation. Her email came an hour later, a template for a certified 30-day notice to quit. I printed it, filled in the names, and wrote in the cause, unpaid utility reimbursements totaling $600. It felt surgical, not personal, just arithmetic. That night, I took my ledger out of the drawer, the one where every transfer lived like a confession. I copied each entry onto clean paper. Feb 14, $500 daycare bridge Jun 2, want $800 rent help Oct 11, $3,700 dental emergency. At the bottom, I wrote, total $2,850 in support. None repaid. This is record, not resentment. Then in red ink, this is support, not silence. I dated it Nov 20 and signed my name like I was witnessing my own patience expire. By deck 1, Chicago had turned to gray ice. I stood inside Ace Hardware on Belmont and bought a new Schlage deadbolt, brass like the one that used to hang on that empty hook. The clerk handed me a yellow carbon receipt, and I slid it into the blue folder behind the closure letter. I scheduled the locksmith for deck 12, the day after the notice clock would officially start ticking. That same evening, Nora stopped by with pierogies and the smell of winter. She set them on the table and studied my folders. You're really going through with this, huh? It's not revenge, I said, pushing the papers toward her. It's record-keeping, she smiled sadly. Most justice starts as record-keeping. We ate in silence for a while. The radiator clicked every few seconds, like it was keeping time. Then she asked, you still coming to Christmas Eve dinner? Wouldn't miss it, I said. But this year I'm bringing dessert and a notary. Her fork paused mid-air. You're turning Christmas into court? No, I said, smiling faintly. I'm turning it into clarity. After she left, I sat at the table and flipped through the deeds and dues notebook. Lorraine's handwriting still lived on the first page. I pressed my hand over it. Oh, we'll do this your way, I said. Neat, honest, signed. Over the next week, I rehearsed calm like it was a trade skill. Each night after dinner, I'd imagine the confrontation. Their faces, their outrage, my steady voice. I wrote one note at the bottom of my page. No shouting, no swearing. Just facts. Deck 3. I walked to the post office and bought a sheet of certified mail labels. The clerk recognized me from my monthly rent deposits. Big mailing today? She asked. Just setting boundaries, I said. She chuckled. I should charge extra for that. I went home, sealed the envelope, and slid it onto the counter beside the stove. Tomorrow I'd post it. Tonight, I wanted to feel what peace sounded like before you earned it. The next morning I brewed coffee, turned off the radio and listened. The house was quiet but not empty. For the first time since that text, I didn't feel erased. I felt organized. I looked again at the empty key hook by the door, the faint ring of dust still there. Soon it would mean nothing. New lock, new code, new start. Before bed, I wrote in my notebook, Deck 12, Riquet locks Deck 24, dinner plus notary Jan 9, court if needed. The steps felt like wiring a system, neutral, grounded, safe. I thought of Mia, her small hands, her laugh. She didn't deserve the fallout, but she deserved an example. Boundaries aren't walls. They're fences with gates that only open for those who knock with respect. When I turned out the lights, the radiator hissed softly. Not angry anymore, just working. The same way I would, Deck 10, 9:12 a.m. The sky hung low and colorless when I sealed the certified envelope and walked it down to the post office. Pine Sol still lingered from the morning scrub I'd given the hall. I handed the letter to the clerk, watched her print the tracking receipt, and slipped it into my blue folder. When I came home, I taped a copy of the notice to the garden unit door, the paper curling slightly at the corners from the heat of the radiator below. For a long moment, I just stood there and listened to the silence. No voices, no movement, only the faint hum of a refrigerator behind their door. At 3:40 p.m., my phone buzzed, a single text from my son. You're a coward. Then another. Mia won't forget this. I sat at the kitchen table, the radiator clanging faintly like a jury murmuring. I took a screenshot, slid the USPS receipt under it, and wrote the time in ink beside the entry in my deeds and dues notebook. Boundary served. Response, anger. At 5:07 p.m., another text arrived. "We'll see about this in court." I typed nothing. Instead, I opened the blue folder, double-checked the documents, closure letter, notice copy, lock invoice, certified receipt, and felt the weight of order settling into me like ballast. Deck 11. The family group chat lit up. His wife had posted a picture of herself at a charity gala. Gold place setting, sequined gown. Caption, "Building our empire." I noticed the 6/12 Venmo request I'd sent remained untouched, pending. I didn't cancel it. I let the silence do what silence does best, reveal. By deck 12, the locksmith arrived, a quiet man in a canvas jacket with hands steady from decades of practice. He removed the old cylinder, installed the new Schlags deadbolt, and handed me the yellow carbon receipt. "Keep that," he said. "People like to forget who owns which lock." "I never forget anymore," I told him. The new deadbolt clicked closed for the first time. A small sound, but it carried the weight of 40 years of unpaid gratitude. That evening, I cooked chili and listened to the voice messages that had stacked up during the day. "Return the key. This is insane. You're ruining Christmas." I saved each one, labeled them Deck 12 voicemails. No anger, no reply. Revenge, I was learning, was less about noise and more about filing. Deck 14, Nora texted, "You okay?" I sent back a picture of the blue folder on the table, its edges neatly squared. She replied with a thumbs-up emoji and a heart. That's all the language we needed. By deck 15, the air in the house had changed. Colder outside, yes, but cleaner inside. I took 2 cashier's checks to the bank. $300 made out to the church toy drive, in Mia's name. $400 for the building's boiler fund. When Elena processed them, she smiled. "Still generous." "Not generous," I said. "Balanced." That night, I watched a dusting of snow gather on the window ledge. For the first time in weeks, the sight didn't sting. Deck 17. A thick envelope arrived from Ms. Patel. Final copies of the trust amendment and transfer on death instrument. The red folder I'd bought at Walgreens waited for them. I slipped the papers inside, along with the notary sheet I'd reserved for Deck 24. That same night, I got a text from Nora. "Dinner table's ready. Red runner, white plates." Dorsey confirmed for notary. "Bring the pen Lorraine loved." I smiled, even laughed once. Lorraine's old gold ink pen sat in the drawer beside the measuring tape and her last grocery list. She used to say, "Signatures are tiny vows." I polished the pen and wrote a note to myself on the back of a utility bill. Deck 24. Speak calm. Present proof. Sign with grace. Then I sat at the table and imagined it. The room, the smell of cinnamon and roast beef, the shocked silence when I laid out my folders. It wasn't revenge that excited me. It was control, clean and lawful. Revenge shouts. Control whispers, "I have receipts." When the clock struck midnight, I turned off the lights and stood by the window. My reflection looked back, older, smaller, but steadier. The street lamp painted the snow a soft orange. I whispered to the glass, "It's not about payback. It's about record-keeping." The radiator hissed, almost like applause. Outside, flakes began to fall. Inside, the locks gleamed new under the kitchen light. And somewhere between the sound of settling pipes and the ticking wall clock, I realized I wasn't dreading Christmas anymore. I was preparing for it. Deck 22. The morning light slanted pale through the blinds when the envelope from the dealership arrived. Thick, official, with that smell of printer toner and purpose. Inside was the bill of sale for my old '03 F-150. I'd finally sold it, clean and legal, for $4,800. My hands trembled, not from loss, but from clarity. I walked the check to Hawthorne and Belmont Bank, deposited $4,500, and told Elena to open a 529 college savings account for Mia Turner, beneficiary. She blinked. "You sure about this? Given everything?" "Yes," I said. "She's the only Turner who still calls me Grandpa in her sleep." Elena smiled and printed the account confirmation on crisp paper. I folded it neatly, slid it into my red folder. The rest, $300 in cash, I kept in an envelope marked Mia, winter boots. At home that afternoon, I left a voicemail on my son's phone. Calm, even unrehearsed. Christmas Eve is at Nora's, 5:30, come eat. No threats. No explanations. I ended it there. For the first time in years, I slept through the night. Deck 23, 11 a.m. Elena called again. Fraud alerts all green. No attempts to reopen the joint card. You're in the clear. Good, I said. Then all that's left is dessert. She laughed softly, not knowing how literal I meant it. That afternoon I cleaned the kitchen like it was a ritual. Every dish scrubbed, every counter wiped. I opened the window, let in the bitter winter air, and listened to the traffic hum like a pulse outside. Then I took out a small book wrapped in brown paper. Make Way for Ducklings, the same one I used to read to Mia when she was 4 and couldn't fall asleep without Mr. Mallard's voice. On the inside cover, I wrote in neat block letters for Mia when she's ready to be read to by me again. Love, Grandpa. I tied it with a thin red ribbon and slid it into the red folder behind the trust amendment and the notary sheet. Then I added the 529 confirmation on top, like the last brick in a wall built with patience. The house was silent, the kind of silence that listens back. I walked room to room, checking locks, papers and light switches, an electrician's ritual, order in small systems. Lorraine used to say, you can't control people, but you can control the current. By evening, the wind off Lake Michigan howled like a warning or a benediction. I couldn't tell which. I sat by the window, watching the flakes start to fall, and thought about the text from 6 weeks ago. We need space from you. They'd get their space. All right, legal, documented, ironclad. I went to the fridge. Looked at the index card. Help is not ownership. Help is stewardship. Under it, I added a line in pen. Stewardship is sometimes silence. That night, I laid out my clothes for the next day. Dark suit, pressed shirt. Shoes polished enough to reflect regret if it dared show up. I checked the folders one last time. Blue folder, closure letter. Notice, certified receipts, lock invoice. Red folder, trust amendment, 529 confirmation, book for Mia, notary sheet, 2 colors, 2 boundaries. 2 endings. I poured a small glass of bourbon, the one Lorraine used to call my thinking fuel, and toasted the quiet house. To order, I said out loud. And to tomorrow, the radiator hissed softly, like applause from the ghosts that still lived in these walls. When I turned off the lights, the house felt lighter, like it finally understood the difference between warmth and dependence. Tomorrow would be Day 24, Christmas Eve, the night I'd stop being the man who gave everything and start being the man who kept the receipts. Deck 24, 5:30 p.m. Chicago's lake wind bit like punishment, sharp and personal. I walked up the steps to Nora's condo in Uptown, clutching the blue and red folders under my arm like scripture. Through the frosted window, I saw the glow of string lights, the blur of family, the shadow of laughter that didn't yet know what it was walking into. Inside, warmth hit me. Cinnamon, roast beef, pine candles, and for a second I almost believed in forgiveness. Nora met me at the door, wiping her hands on a dish towel. You sure? She whispered. I nodded. I'm done asking permission in my own family. The table was long and hopeful. 12 plates, gold flatware, red runner. My son arrived late, 5:47 by my watch. His wife shimmering in a gold dress, her perfume loud enough to compete with the roast. He hugged Nora, kissed her cheek, then looked at me like I was a stranger who'd wandered into a private club. We ate the first course in brittle politeness. I watched his wife snap photos of the food for social media, watched my son carve meat like he was sawing through obligation. Mia wasn't there. She's with friends, his wife had said, voice syrupy. I'd nodded, though the lie sat thick in the air. After grace and silence and second helpings, I stood. My hands didn't shake. The voices around the table died one by one, until all I could hear was the faint clink of silverware. I brought dessert, I said. Nora glanced at me. The cue. She gave Mr. Dorsey a small nod. He rose from his chair, carrying his notary stamp in its leather case. The metallic snap of it opening turned more heads than a thunderclap would have. I set the blue folder on the table first. "This," I said, "is documentation, not an accusation." I opened it slowly, like scripture. Exhibit 1, the printed text message from my son. "We need space from you. Please don't reach out anymore at all." I slid it forward. "That was the last thing you ever said to me until today." He shifted, eyes darting toward his wife. "Dad, this isn't—" I raised a hand. "Just listening, not defending. That's the rule tonight. Exhibit 2, the florist bill, 2,180, my signature at the bottom. Your engagement flowers. You said you'd handle it later. Later never came. Exhibit 3, the Zelle transfers, printed with each date and memo. Daycare, rent, dental, emergencies. $2,500 all told. I kept the ledger because I'm an electrician, not a fool." He rubbed his forehead. "You're embarrassing yourself." "No, son," I said softly. "I'm documenting myself." I slid forward Elena's closure letter, dated Novi 18. "Joint emergency card, closed. You'll find the account unavailable. Paper doesn't forget." His wife straightened in her chair, voice icy. "Is this about money?" "Because that's pathetic. This," I said, "placing the county property record on top of the stack, is about ownership, of property, of peace, of self." The black stamp glinted under the chandelier light. "Transfer on death instrument. Beneficiary, Mia Turner." Her face went pale. "You can't just—" "I can," I said, "and I have. The house on West Roscoe will go to Mia at 25. Not you, not your husband. The trust amendment is notarized tonight." Dorsey uncapped his stamp with a soft click that sounded like justice loading. The table had gone church quiet. Nora's fork clinked gently as she set it down. "Dad," my son said finally, voice cracking. "Why are you doing this? Why now?" I laid down the USPS receipts, the notice to quit, the lock invoice, all lined like footprints. "Because," I said, "you asked for space, and space cost rent." He looked at me like I'd spoken another language. His wife's eyes darted around the table, gauging sympathy, finding none. I reached for the red folder next. "This one," I said, "isn't for you. It's for Mia." From it, I pulled the 529 confirmation. "College fund. $4,500 deposit. Proof here. Every dollar from selling my truck went to her, not into another of your emergencies." Then I lifted the small book, "Make Way for Ducklings," wrapped in its red ribbon. I read this to her every time she stayed with me. She used to fall asleep on the page where the ducks finally find home. I figured she should still have a copy waiting when she's ready to be read to again. The tension broke like glass. His wife muttered, "This is manipulative." I turned to her. "Ma'am, manipulation is taking without acknowledgement. This is transparency." Mr. Dorsey cleared his throat. "Shall we proceed?" I nodded. He stamped the trust amendment once, twice, then handed me the pen, Lorraine's gold one. I signed beneath the clause, "Beneficiary adjustment, grandchild only." Then I handed it to Nora, who signed as witness, her eyes bright with quiet pride. My son's voice came small, almost childlike. "You really hate us that much?" "Hate?" I said, sliding the pen back into my pocket. "No, son. Hate burns fast. This," I gestured at the papers, "burns slow, steady, and clean. It's called consequence." Silence held the table for a long moment. Even the radiator seemed to pause. Finally, I stood straight. "You have until January 9th to vacate the garden unit. Court will confirm if necessary. You'll find no malice in the paperwork, just dates, signatures, and balances." I took the red folder back, placed it gently under my arm. "I'm not cutting you off from love," I said quietly. "I'm cutting you off from the illusion that love means free access." For a moment, nobody moved. Then Nora whispered, "Dessert," trying to rescue the evening's corpse of normalcy. I nodded. "Dessert sounds good." Mr. Dorsey, still standing, gave the final notary stamp, the sound sharp and definitive. The red folder closed with a soft click, a coffin lid for entitlement. My son sat back, eyes glossy with shock, maybe regret, maybe anger. His wife's face flushed a bright, furious red. I turned to Nora, kissed her forehead, and said, "Merry Christmas." As I stepped out into the freezing air, the sky was full of snow and silence. Behind me, muffled through the door, came the faint sound of voices rising, confusion, protest, maybe realization. I didn't turn back. The folders under my arm were warm. The night air felt clean. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a bank account pretending to be a father. I felt like a man who had finally balanced his books. Christmas came and went like a bruise, tender when pressed, fading slow. The morning after the dinner, I woke to grey light on the curtains and a silence that didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt earned. The blue folder sat on the counter, the red one locked in the drawer with Lorraine's pen on top. The radiator hissed a steady applause. By deck 26, the calls started. 3 missed, 1 voicemail. I didn't listen. By deck 28, my son tried text instead. You made your point. Can we talk? I didn't reply. There's no point explaining boundaries to someone who benefits from their absence. Jan 2, I walked down to the garden unit. The air smelled faintly of stale beer and pine sol. The notice I'd taped to the door was still there, edges curling, my signature clear and calm beneath it. I took a photo with the timestamp and slipped it into the deeds and dues notebook. The new lock gleamed in the dim light like a quiet verdict. Later that afternoon, Nora sent me screenshots from the family group chat. Half the relatives were furious. How could you humiliate him like that? The other half wrote things like, wish I had your backbone. I replied to none of them. But I texted Nora one word, documented. On Jan 5, I walked through the local park, hands in my coat pockets, breath fogging in front of me. The snow underfoot crunched like folded paper. I thought of Mia, her gap-toothed grin, the way she'd point at Christmas lights and whisper magic. I hoped one day she'd understand that this wasn't punishment. It was preservation. That night I sat at the kitchen table and logged every attempt at contact in my notebook. Date, time, method. One column titled Emotional Noise, one titled Legal Progress. By Jan 8, I received a letter from the courthouse. Hearing scheduled, Jan 9, Division 4. Housing Court. Ms. Patel had filed the papers quietly after Christmas. You don't need to say much, she'd told me. Let the documents speak. You've already done the work. That morning I ironed my shirt, polished my shoes, and put the blue folder into my old briefcase. On the bus ride downtown, the city looked washed in steel and smoke. People scrolled their phones, shoulders hunched. I sat straight, the calmest man on that bus. The courthouse smelled like wet coats and paperwork. Ms. Patel met me at the bench outside the chamber. You ready? She asked. I've been ready since November 3rd, I said. Inside, the judge flipped through the pages. Certified letters, utility reimbursements, title printouts, closure letter, all stamped, dated, and aligned like soldiers. My son sat across the room, his wife beside him, both small under fluorescent light. The judge's voice was brisk. 30-day notice proper. Proof of service valid? Agreement reached. Ms. Patel nodded. We're requesting a stipulated repayment plan. $200 a month, acknowledgement of debt, no penalties. The judge looked at my son. You agree? He swallowed. Yes, Your Honor. The gavel's tap was soft, almost merciful. Stipulation approved, the judge said. Move out complete. Repayment begins February 15th. Outside the courtroom, Ms. Patel shook my hand. You just built a case study in quiet boundaries, she said. I smiled. Electricians call it grounding. That evening, when I came home, a small, square envelope sat on my doormat. Inside was a drawing in crayon. 2 ducks on a blue river, a crooked sun overhead. At the bottom, written in shaky letters, Mia, age 6, no note. No return address. Just tape marks where little fingers had pressed it closed. I pinned it to the fridge beside a new index card that read, Paper can wound. Paper can mend. I made soup that night, lentil and carrot, and ladled it into 2 bowls, one for me, one for Nora, who came over with a bottle of wine and a quiet grin. You really did it, she said. Not revenge, I replied, stirring. Just repair work. The radiator hissed like it agreed. The house was warm, quiet, lawful. Mine again. When she left, I washed the dishes slowly, each clink echoing like punctuation. By the time I turned off the lights, The city outside was covered in a clean sheet of snow, and I realized something I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't waiting for their apology anymore. I'd already written my own closure, and the court had signed it. Justice doesn't arrive with trumpets. It comes in envelopes, transfers, and quiet mornings when you finally wake without checking your phone. Feb 15, 9:01 a.m. The first $200 repayment landed in my account with a one-word memo, acknowledged. I stared at it longer than I should have. Not because of the amount, it barely covered the interest on patience, but because it was proof that silence had finally spoken back. The garden unit was already empty. They'd moved out on Jan 31, leaving behind a folded note on the counter, "We'll get things together. Thank you for letting us stay." And beside it, a spare key, placed dead center like a confession. I picked it up, felt the familiar weight of brass, and smiled. The space smelled faintly of bleach and regret. I opened the window, let the cold February air sweep through, and whispered, "Goodbye, entitlement," upstairs. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where, 3 months earlier, I'd read the text that started it all. The light fell the same way, but I didn't. I opened the deeds and dues notebook one last time and wrote, "Final balance, boundaries established, accounts reconciled, love intact." Nora texted a photo of her garden buried under snow with the caption, "You did right, brother." I replied with a thumbs-up emoji and a photo of my ledger, the neat handwriting across the pages like a roadmap out of humiliation. At noon, Eleanor from the bank called. "All quiet since December," she said. "No new access attempts. You're clean." "Feels strange," I admitted. "Like waiting for a storm that finally decided to pass." "Peace is strange at first," she said. "Then it feels like policy." By late afternoon, Ms. Patel emailed to check in. "Do you want to pursue restitution beyond the repayment plan?" she asked. "No," I typed back. "Restitution's for damage. Boundaries were repair." I walked down Roscoe Street, past shops and salted sidewalks, past the bakery where I used to take Mia for chocolate milk. A for rent sign gleamed in the garden window. My sign, my terms. When I returned home, I pulled the red folder from the drawer. Inside, the 529 account statement showed $4,540, a few dollars of growth since December. I traced Mia's name with my thumb and imagined her someday opening that letter, seeing her name on paper that meant something solid. That night, I poured 2 mugs of hot chocolate. Habit I couldn't break. I set one in front of the empty chair across from me. It cooled slowly, the steam curling like memory. "Maybe someday, kid," I said aloud. "We'll share this again." I looked toward the wall above the radiator, where Lorraine's photo still hung. Her half-smile, the tired eyes that saw the world clearly long before I did. "You'd like the order of this," I said. "No chaos, just consequence." Later I took a walk by Wrigley Field, the stadium quiet and skeletal in winter. I thought about the summers my son and I spent there, section 232, third base line, 2 hot dogs and a scorecard. Back then he'd ask, "Why do you keep track of every play?" And I'd tell him, "Because the numbers tell the truth even when the fans don't." Now, walking past those locked gates, I understood. I hadn't raised him to fail. I'd raised him to choose. Somewhere along the line, he'd just stopped reading the scoreboard. The wind off the lake cut cold across my face, but I smiled anyway. For the first time in months, it didn't feel like punishment. It felt like renewal. When I got home, I turned down the lights, checked the new locks one more time, and sat at the kitchen table. "I can love you," I whispered into the still air, "without funding your disrespect." The radiator answered in its usual rhythm, steady, grounded, alive. Justice, I realized, doesn't roar. It hums, soft, constant, and undeniable, like a system that finally runs without a short. By March, the snow along Roscoe Street had begun to melt into grey slush, leaving behind cigarette butts, salt stains, and small proofs of survival. The city thawed, and so did something in me. The garden unit didn't stay empty long. I rented it to a graduate student named Aaron, polite kid from Iowa studying architecture. He signed the lease on time, paid the first month's rent, $1,250 even, and showed up the next morning with a box of muffins. "Just a thank you," he said. That was the first time in months someone had handed me something without expecting a return. The building changed temperature after that. The radiators hissed but didn't groan. The mail stacked neat. My mornings were slower. Coffee, radio, the rustle of envelopes that no longer carried dread. One day, while sorting paperwork, I came across Lorraine's old recipe card for her Christmas lasagna. I smiled, folded it, and slid it into the red folder beside Mia's book. Because that's what this folder had become. A record not of loss, but of legacy. My son's repayment came every month now, $200 on time, with no words attached. I didn't need them. A memo line is honesty enough. On March 10th, he sent a text that started and stopped 3 times. "Mia misses..." Then nothing. 10 minutes later, another bubble. "I'm trying." I stared at the screen for a long while, then replied with a photo of the 529 balance, 4,540.23, and wrote, "Your move." He didn't respond, but the message showed read 7:16 p.m. That was enough. Every Saturday, I volunteered at the church pantry on Belmont, stacking cans, sweeping floors, handing out bags of beans and hope. The work was simple, mechanical, but it made sense, the kind of rhythm you can live inside. Mr. Dorsey came sometimes, said the volunteers started calling me the Notary of Boundaries. I told him I'd heard worse nicknames. Nora visited on weekends with pies and gossip. "You know," she said one Sunday, "you've become the family legend. Half think you're cold, the other half think you're brilliant." "Then I've achieved balance," I said. "Finally?" she laughed. "Lorraine would have loved this version of you." That night I opened the Deeds and Dues notebook for the first time in weeks. The last line read, "Final balance boundaries established." I flipped to a blank page and wrote, "Peace, knowing what's yours to carry and what's theirs to fix." Then I closed it for good. Spring crept in quietly. The snow outside turned to rain, and the hum of traffic replaced the groan of radiators. One evening I caught myself humming too. No song in particular, just sound. That's how I knew I'd healed more than I thought. I looked around the living room, the worn recliner, the steady light, the scent of lemon polish, and realized the space wasn't empty anymore. It was mine. Before bed, I checked the locks out of habit. The new Schleich deadbolt clicked firm, safe, predictable. I turned off the lights and whispered into the dark, "You did it, old man." No ghosts answered. Only quiet. Sometimes justice doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like regular rent payments in a calm house, and somewhere out there, I like to think Mia was hearing my name again, not as the villain in grown-up arguments, but as the man who built her future with paper and patience. The city slept. The systems held. And for the first time since that message in November, I didn't feel erased. I felt written back in. April 12th. The city smelled of thawed dirt and possibility. The first daffodils had punched through the soil along Roscoe Street, yellow like small apologies. It was Mia's 7th birthday. I woke early, brewed coffee, and placed a slice of store-bought cake on a plate. Lorraine used to bake, but now I settle for convenience and memory. The mail came just after 10. Among the bills and circulars sat a small pink envelope with glitter smeared along one edge. Inside was a hand-drawn card. 2 ducks, a wobbly sun, the word Grandpa written in uneven purple crayon. I sat down hard, right there at the kitchen table, and let my eyes sting for the first time in months. I didn't need to read the return address. I knew those shaky letters like my own wiring. The frosting on the cake melted a little while I stared at that card. Funny how the smallest gestures repair the biggest cracks. At 4:03 p.m., my phone buzzed. A message from my son. "Dad, can we talk?" I set the phone down and finished my slice of cake first, because if I've learned anything, it's that closure shouldn't come hungry. Then I typed back, "Yes, at Nora's Sunday. Bring the ledger you kept for yourselves." 2 days later, we met in Nora's kitchen, the same place where everything had fractured in December. The air smelled of coffee and cautious hope. My son looked older, thinner, quieter, stripped of that easy arrogance he once wore like cologne. His wife stayed home, he said. I didn't ask why. He started to speak, then stopped, voice trembling. I thought you were done with me. I was done, I said. With the version of you that thought love meant overdraft protection. He swallowed, nodded, and reached into his bag. From it he pulled a small spiral notebook. We've been keeping track. Rent payments, daycare, every dollar. I'm trying to make it right. I slid 2 things across the table toward him. A photocopy of the ledger I'd kept and a printed page I'd taped above my sink weeks ago. The words read, "You didn't lose me. You walked past me." He stared at it for a long time, blinking hard. I don't know if I can fix all of it, he said. Don't fix it, I replied. Understand it. From my briefcase, I pulled out a single sheet of paper, the boundary agreement Ms. Patel had drafted. 3 clauses, simple and human. No financial access without request, no shared accounts or cards, no cancellations of visits with Mia. I slid the pen across the table. You sign? I'll sign. Then we stop owing and start honoring. He hesitated, then took the pen. His hand shook as he wrote his name, but he did it. Then I added mine beneath his, steady and sure. The ink shimmered in the light for a second, before drying into permanence. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The refrigerator hummed softly. Outside, a bird sang something that sounded like forgiveness. He finally whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on us." I met his eyes. I didn't. I just waited for you to knock. When he left, I stood by the window watching him walk down the street, smaller against the sunlight but moving forward. On my way home, the lake caught the late afternoon light and flashed like glass. The wind off it was gentle for once, carrying the faint smell of lilac. When I reached the 2 flat, I looked up at the brick facade, at the fresh coat of paint around the garden unit's door, and thought Lorraine would like this order. Inside, I put Mia's card on the fridge, poured a small bourbon, and toasted the radiator's quiet hum. Justice, I realized, isn't the end of a fight. It's the start of a clean ledger, one where love can finally live without interest attached. And as the city exhaled into spring, I whispered my final line into the still air. You didn't lose me, son. You just finally found where I stood.